I just got a new solar generator in, and I actually received this letter from the manufacturer after I bought it. It actually took a couple of weeks to get here, even though it's Amazon Prime. So they sent me a letter. It was supposed to arrive here before the generator did. It says, thank you very much for your Bluetti solar power station purchase. It'll take about 3 to 5 work days to reach you. So it's just letting me know when it was going to arrive. So that's what we got inside of here, is the Bluetti from MAXOAK. Okay, got a user manual warranty right off the top. Gonna be our connections box. It's got our wall charger, solar panel charger. Keep that handy. Got the MAXOAK Bluetti. Now the reason I was interested in buying the MAXOAK Bluetti is because it has a 1500 watt-hour battery, which is one of the largest portable solar generator batteries on the current market. However, it does only have a 1000 watt inverter. So it's kind of sad to see that, but in the end, I run most of my things for less than 1000 watts. You hold the power button here to turn it on. Looks like it's about 80% full. So, go ahead and stick the wall charger on it. Okay, so it keeps turning off because it's cold. I get my reading here though, 45, 46 degrees. So you definitely don't want to charge lithium ion if it is below freezing. We're definitely well above freezing right now. The fan's blowing because the charger's on it. And so we're just going to let that sit here for about an hour or so and see where it's at. Okay, so I've actually got all the specs here on my spec sheet. I'm just going to run through them really quick. It's a 1500 watt-hour battery. It's a 12-volt battery. Its battery draw capacity is 1000 watts, and the inverter is pure sine wave as well as 1000 watts. Now the reason that's important is because some solar generators have a larger inverter than what the battery can actually run. It is lithium ion, and its inverter peak is only 1200 watts. And that's just for a couple of seconds. So I really do wish that the inverter peak was actually 2000 watts. Not sure why it's not double the continuous rating. It's rated to 1000 life cycles, which is pretty good. You know, it's better if it were 2000 life cycles, but some of them are rated to 500 life cycles. So 1000 life cycles is fine. Its max solar input is 500 watts, but really what it says here on the charge port is a max of 60 volts and 10 amps. And when you take volts and multiply it by amps, you get watts. So in theory, you could actually input up to 600 watts. Now there's a little hiccup with that. In the manual and on the box here, it does say 500 watts is the max, but it's really, really hard to reach that 500 watt mark without exceeding either 60 volts or 10 amps. I'll show that to you here in a little bit. So that means it can make about 2500 watts of power a day. It uses a barrel connector that's DC7909. It's not really a common connector, but it can be found. The whole point is that if I had misplaced my solar panel adapter, that I would need to replace it somehow, and I can't readily find this at like an RV store or an electronics store very easily. I'm definitely gonna have to make this on my own. So it's really important to keep good track of that solar panel cable. Its fastest charge time is about 3 hours, and when it comes to its simultaneous charging ability, most of the time what that means is can it charge from like a wall charger and solar panels, or a car charger and solar panels, or something like that at the same time. And you can't, because there's only one charge port. It doesn't come with a car charger. It's not meant to be charged off of a car. And I think the reason that is because the minimum charge rate is 16 volts, and a car battery at max is going to be putting out about 14 volts. So basically the voltage just doesn't get high enough to charge the battery up well. It does have an MPPT charge controller, which is really nice. MPPT charge controllers are really designed for cloudy days. When it's not perfectly clear, it's going to be able to use the solar panels. It's a computer, so it's going to figure out which way to use the solar panels to best charge the Bluetti. It does weigh in at 38 pounds. 35 pounds is kind of my limit on portability, So it's just barely above that. It's not horrible, and it does have a really nice grippy handle here, so I do like that, but it is just a little bit on the heavy side. Now, one of the biggest things that is really sad about the Bluetti is it only comes with 2 AC plugs. I would really like to see at least 4, but that's what it's got. Now, it does have the DC cigarette lighter plug, and it says it's rated to 12 volts and 9 amps. 9 amps is a little low, but that's okay. I don't use it this much, but a lot of other people will use it for like a DC refrigerator or something like that. So just make sure that 9 amps isn't exceeded when you're using that. But it does have 4 USB plugs, and it says that each one of these is rated to 3 amps. And it does have a 45 watt USB-C port, and so that allows for really fast charging. I personally don't have anything that uses USB-C directly like that for charging, but it's cool that it has it. There's no RV plug on here, and that makes sense for the size of it. A 1000 watt inverter is a little small to be putting on an RV, and the user manual does say to charge it up once every 3 months. It has a full 1-year manufacturer warranty, so basically if there's any defects in it, it's going to get replaced for free. Well, that's really too bad that there's no expandable batteries for this, but that kind of makes sense because it would also need to be able to expand its solar panel input, which it can't do either. So it is sized right for itself. For those that are interested, it is not EMP proof, but this would definitely fit in a Tech Protect extra large Faraday bag, which is really affordable and easy way to get this EMP protected. Now, what I like most about the Bluetti is that its inverter is rated to its battery output capacity. Like I was explaining, some solar generators have a larger inverter than what the battery can actually put out for energy. And so that means I am paying more for a product that I can't use. So as much as I wish it had a 1500 watt inverter and a 1500 watt hour battery, obviously they understand that the battery is not going to be able to consistently push out the 1500 watts. And so they used a more affordable, yet still pure sine wave 1000 watt inverter. So I do appreciate that, not having to overpay for components I can't use. Now, one of the things I do notice about these brick chargers like this is they tend to get really hot. And so what I like to do is stick them right in front of the fan here, because electronics work better when they're cooler actually. And so to make sure this is getting the most efficient charge, and just to make sure this thing doesn't overheat, which is definitely not going to, but if this were, for example, like on carpet or like setting on someone's bed, that's going to insulate it and it's going to get it really hot. So you want to be mindful of that. Make sure this is on a hard surface, because then it's going to dissipate that heat better. And even better is if you put it right by the exhaust fan here, it's going to help keep it much cooler. So just keep a little bit of space right there. Okay, well it says it's full, but when I plug this in, it still says it's putting in about 160 watts of energy. So it must not be 100% all the way full, but enough for the battery indicator to say that it's all the way full. That is one of the things I wish it did have, was an actual percentage meter. I prefer those over these bars, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and put some loads on this and see what it can run. Okay, so it just turned off again by itself. So I guess it's still cold enough to where it thinks it needs to be turning off automatically. That's really weird. I'm going to go ahead and turn the DC on, AC on. And I've got this extension cord plugged into my freezer right here. I really wish it had more than 2 plugs. Let's see how much power that's drawing. Okay, 129 watts. And what I like about this heat gun for doing these tests is it's got all these different levels, and so it makes it really easy to kind of get it to the level that we want to drain it. Okay, it's definitely warming up. I wish the screen would stay on. Okay, I'm going to go a little higher. Okay, so we're about 800, 900, jumping quite a bit. Definitely putting out a good amount of heat. And drop this down on low, and go on to high. Ooh, that got really close to 1,000. We know for a fact that it can't run more than 1,000 watts continuously. So I just want to get close to that. Ooh, 984, 1,000. So that seems to be about where it's going to want to stay. So I'm just going to let this run for a few minutes and see if it can hold that power right near 1,000 watt, or if it turns off after a couple of minutes. So far this has been running for about 5 minutes. It hasn't had any issues at all. And what I like is is when it's running a high load like this, it doesn't drop the battery level to a really low level like some other generators do. So it appears to be that it's pulling data from the amps of the battery rather than the voltage. Because some other units, you'll turn on a high load, and then the battery says it's almost near dead, when actually it's still pretty full. So that's really cool to see on the Bluetti. Well, I ran the heat gun for about 15 minutes, so that's good that it didn't shut off. That means the inverter definitely will run that amount of power, no problem. And I've had my freezer plugged in the whole time as well, and it's been about 2.5 hours since I stopped the last section of the video. So it says it has about 60% left. So what I'm going to do is actually let this run my freezer for the next few hours until I get ready to go to bed and see what charge it's at. Well, naturally I forgot to come back in and check on this. It says that the battery is completely depleted. It's been about 14 hours since I actually checked on this. Obviously it didn't make it through the whole night, but this will be good to see how well it charges. So since this is completely drained, it has just enough power to barely turn on. You can see the battery's all the way down. We're going to go ahead and connect this up with solar panels. Now it says it's rated for 500 watts. The issue with that is the actual limitation is no less than 16 volts and no more than 60 volts at a max of 10 amps. Now, the 100-watt solar panels will generally put out right about 5 amps, sometimes a little bit more. It depends on the sun. And each panel is about 20 volts when it's in full sun. And so the problem is, if you were just to put 5 panels together in series, that's going to increase voltage. And so you'll take 5 panels times 20 volts is going to be 100 volts, which is going to exceed the maximum input. And then if you connect them all in parallel, the volts will be 20 volts, but because they're connected in parallel, the amps will go up to about 30 amps, 25 to 30 amps. So the problem is, basically, using an all series or all parallel connection, this gets exceeded. The best that I have found is to have 2 sets of 200 watts in panels each. 400 watts seems to be the max that I can actually get out of it. So let's go ahead and connect it up to the panels and have this charge up today. Now what you can see here is that we have 2 sets of series or panels in series. So I've got one positive or male and one negative female, and then these are connected together here, and the same's going on over here. Got these 2 panels connected, and I've got one male and one female, or one positive and one negative. So each of these are going to be making 40 volts and about 5 amps roughly. So when we combine them together, it'll become a parallel connection right here, and that'll make about 10 amps. Let's show you how that connects. So I got my Y branch connector, and you see this tapers down into one. It's got 2 male ends, 2 female ends on the other. So all of the male positive will go on this side, and the negative female on this side. So that will come out with 1 male, 1 female, positive and negative. And now I can take my negative or my female, plug it into this cable, and then do the same into this cable. So now what we have are 2 arrays of series now connected into parallel for a series parallel connection to make about 400 watts. Now, as you can see here, we've got a little bit of light cloudiness. The sun is at a real steep angle because we're in the fall here, so we probably won't make all 400 watts. It's good to keep in mind that it's rare to get ideal conditions. Okay, so I've got my 12 gauge cable here coming off the panels. 12 gauge is plenty because we're not exceeding 20 amps, which is what the 12 gauge is rated to. And then I've got the solar panel adapter here. So all I have to do, plug it in here, take my positive, connect it in. Now, really the biggest thing is forget positive, negative, go male, female. Forget colors. It really doesn't matter the colors. These could be all black or all red, it doesn't matter. Just remember male to female. It's the only way to connect it, and it'll work. So now it says we're making 330 watt, which is actually really, really good for a day like today. So that means we're making 75 watts or so per panel, which isn't really bad at all. Most solar panels on a day like today that are not the Flex 100 will end up being somewhere around 50 or 40, even 30 watts per panel, which is why I recommend the Flex 100. They really do work the best. There's nothing worse than connecting the panels up to find out that it's not doing as much power as it's rated to. So you've spent all this money and it can't do what you need it to do. Now the other thing I recommend is getting this watt meter. This is a specially designed one that's meant for heavy power loads because it's an 8 gauge. So these are custom made. But what you can see is I've just connected the solar panels here onto the input side. And we'll take these, connect them in, plug it in. And what it's going to show us here is exactly how many amps we're making at how many volts. And this is a really, really good way to make sure that this system is not getting overused. So we can see with the 4 panels, we're at 9.5 amps right now. This may still fluctuate. So this I have found is pretty much the max that it can handle. But there is the option of adding 50 watt panels to either side of the solar panel array. And sometimes that'll work depending on the sun conditions. So this does have the ability to be running items while it's charging. Now because this is at 0 battery essentially, we're only going to really be able to run up to whatever is going in on the solar panels. So if we were to put on, say, a 200 watt load, well then we'd take 200 away from 340, leaving us a surplus of 140 watts going into the battery. If the battery is empty and we're making 140 watts going into a 1500 watt hour battery, it's going to take roughly 11 hours or so for this to get fully charged, which means it's going to need at least 2 days to get fully charged at that rate. But since there's no load on it right now, and we're charging about 340 watts, it's going to take 4 to 5 hours to charge, which isn't bad at all for a single day, as long as we're not running too much. One of the great things I do like about the Bluetti is it does have overcharge protection. And what that means is essentially if this were to hit over 10 amps or over 60 volts, rather than this getting into big trouble, it's just going to have an error code and shut off the charge controller. So that way no fires or anything like that start. I actually had that happen to me on the solar generator. It didn't have charge protection on it. And basically it was a semi-cloudy day. And so according to the watt meter, everything was fine. And I was within the parameters that were set by the manufacturer for how many panels can be connected. However, what ended up happening is the clouds cleared away and the panels made more power than the solar generator could handle. It wasn't the Bluetti, it was a different solar generator, and it was from a few years ago. But what ended up happening is it got overcharged and the adapter actually burnt up. It could have started a fire, luckily it didn't. Basically I walked in and it smelled like electrical fire, and luckily nothing happened. So that was with a unit I haven't done a review about because I couldn't recommend that one, simply because of that. So I'd much rather walk back in here after a couple hours and see that this had an error code and that it didn't catch on fire, rather than finding out that it's on fire. So that's another good feature about the Bluetti. So I would definitely say that I could recommend the Bluetti. It's been really good for me testing it out. I am excited to see how it performs in the next 6 months to a year, even later. But because it's got a lithium-ion battery, I'll basically just charge it up once every 3 months just to make sure it's in perfect health. In my experience, though, lithium-ion batteries will do just fine after sitting for a year. So it's not too big of a deal to leave this. Well, I hope you found this really helpful. I really like the Bluetti. I feel confident in recommending it for people who need it. I would get the Bluetti, 4 100 watt solar panels, 1 set of the 2-way or wide branch MC4 connectors, 50 feet of 12 gauge solar cable, MC4 cable, a watt meter, that way you can continue to check the status of each panel as well as how much power is coming in, so you know you're not over amping this or over volting it. It's important to know that this watt meter is the most powerful one that I've been able to find, and these are custom made, and it's limited to a 50 amp continuous draw as well as a 60 volt continuous draw, which is perfect for this setup right here. With all of that, and I'll provide the links below for you, I have found this to be a very solid and reliable system for running essentials around the house, especially during blackouts, or for running small things around an RV or a campsite or whatever. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I have content coming out on a weekly basis. I buy all of this equipment with my own money. I am not sponsored by anybody. And don't forget to check out poweredportablesolar.com. There's a full review of the Bluetti on there, as well as other recommendations that you might find helpful. If you have any questions at all about the Bluetti or any other solar generator or system that you'd like to consider, please email me at info@poweredportablesolar.com, and that's the fastest way to get a hold of me, or you can also go to the contact page on poweredportablesolar.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll catch you next time.